Okay, so officially we start now. Thank you everyone for coming. And we've had an soul session that just closed now. So we'll just get right into the meat of the day. I would like to invite our panelists, and first on the list would be Rushna Mutaza. She's representing the country representative of the UNICEF, and she's also the deputy country representative of UNICEF. Please make her welcome, please. It works well because we have two male and two female, so that's fine, whichever works. It's my complete honor also to welcome the Statistician-General and the Chief Executive Officer of the National Bureau of Statistics. We have Prince Semiu Adeniran. Yes, sir. We await the third panelist, who is Mr. Omoboyede Olusanya, who is the Managing Director and the CEO of Flower Maize. I guess he's going to join us as soon as we, oh, is he here? Oh, sorry. Okay. So please make welcome Mr. Omoboyede Olusanya. My complete honor, sir. Oh, you are representing him. Okay, so I would then allow everyone to still welcome them to introduce themselves. And lastly, I would like to welcome to the panel Ms. Yosola Akinbi. She is the National Coordinator for the Core Working Group on Human Capital Development. Please make welcome Ms. Yosola. We've had quite passionate conversations and I would say speeches today, and a lot of way forwards were recommended in terms of policy. Also, there was a grim situation that was painted. I don't want to add further to all of the things that have been said in terms of what is not working in Nigeria, but there is an illustration I would like to put across before we fully get into speed. I've participated in what the Vice President mentioned, the largest social protection investment work that's been done in Nigeria. And in the last 5 years, I'm no longer on that project. But within the 5 years, 4 years time period that I was part of it, it was on one occasion that we went to the field. And for the first time, I saw the realities of what poverty meant to some people. There was a woman that came with what we call Ghana Must Go. Who knows what Ghana Must Go is? Yeah, absolutely. Surely you should know. And she came to collect 5,000 naira. But she came with Ghana Must Go to collect 5,000 naira. We know we have the smaller version now, but in our reality, in our lived experience, she has never held a total 5,000 naira before. And because sometimes we sit in our offices, we don't know the realities of people living at the bottom of the pyramid. So this session today is going to, highlight the work that needs to be done, not just needs to be done, but is being done in terms of collecting real data and collecting not just data, but also the feedback from people on the field. I must also lay some context in the sense that during the pandemic, we had people that were normally not counted as poor, and we mean the urban poor. You can go to places like Ikoyi or Metama in Abuja, and you see where you have people that are domestic staff. When we have social protection work, they are never counted as the poor because we always recognize people that are living in the villages, in local government areas, in wards, and identify them as the poor. But we have those that we call the urban poor. I must say that the multidimensional poverty that we are discussing today, some activities have progressed in terms of that. I am introducing you today to the Multidimensional Poverty Index that was conducted by the National Bureau of Statistics, and that will be the center of our conversation today. But before that also, I would like to extend invitation to you because there will be a formal launch of the MPI report, the result itself, by the president on Thursday, same Transcorp Hilton, where the result findings of this exercise will be shared. I must say that probably you will have seen the briefing note for this session. We have a headline result and we have 133 million Nigerians living in poverty. There was a question posed to the Honorable Minister of Finance. What actually is the population of Nigeria? We can say, you know, between the range of 211 million and 216 million. But we stuck with 211 million. So we have about 63% of our Nigerians living in multidimensional poverty. And what do we mean by that? People that are deprived in terms of access to good quality education, to good healthcare services, to the basic living standards in terms of access to water, access to healthcare facilities, how they cook, the kind of houses they live, and also people that are impacted because of the shocks and insecurity in Nigeria, and also the unemployment situation that we have in Nigeria. So the multidimensional poverty survey that was conducted looked at these dimensions in education, in healthcare, in living standards, in works and shocks, in security, and in unemployment. How multidimensionally deprived or poor are these people? And amongst all of these people, who are those that are living in extreme poverty? It is then my honor to, at this point, start with the CEO and the Statistician-General of the National Bureau of Statistics to run us through how this process happened and to talk more about the MPI. Thank you.
Thank you, the moderator. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, my fellow panelists. The Multidimensional Poverty Index Survey is the intent, as I can call it, the best approach by which countries all over the world are adopting to measure poverty in all its ramifications. As we all know, the normal poverty measurement that we are used to is the income monetary measurement of poverty. And that was what Nigeria has also been using over the couple of years. As we are aware, the last figure of 82.9 million people in poverty in Nigeria that we have been using as official figure for Nigeria is derived from the Nigerian Living Standards Survey, which was conducted in 2018, 2019, and was released during the COVID period 2020 with headline poverty rate of 40.1, which translates to 82.9 million Nigerians. But when Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari, declared the mandate to take 100 million Nigerians out of poverty by the year 2030. If the figure of 82.9 million derived from the Nigerian Living Standards Service is what we are using, it means that we don't even have 100 million people in poverty to take out over that period. But looking at the Multidimensional Poverty Index survey that we recently conducted, which look at poverty from multiple deprivation that household and individual members of the household suffer at the same time, then you can see that it is the real measure, appropriate measure for us to take to measure poverty in the country. For MPI, we look at deprivation in the area of 4 dimensions, namely health, education, sanitation, living standard, and work and shocks. Under the earth, we look at critical indicators that can take people into poverty if it is not addressed. And those indicators under earth are, we have the nutrition. We have been talking about human capital development, and one of the key considerations when we want to develop human capital is to look at the nutrition right from inception, that is conception, up to childhood. If nutrition is not taken care of, the mental development of the child will be impaired. So when we talk of human capital development, nutrition is critical to that. Under earth, we also look at food security, or what you can say food insecurity. Looking at the issue of flood, issue of inflation and all that, we have been told at the opening ceremony that one of the core drivers of our inflation in the country is the food inflation. So we are looking at food insecurity in the household as part of the measurement that we took cognizance of in the earth dimension. Also under earth dimension, we look at indicator of time to healthcare, that is access to healthcare facilities. Then from earth, we move on to education. Education is another area where we consider in the computation of multidimensional poverty index. And under education, we have school attendance. We are told also in the opening ceremony about out of school children, which is being counted now to be 20 million out of school children. So we are looking at school attendance. We are looking at year of schooling for any member of the household, 15 years and above. Also, we are considering school life. This is looking at quality of education, not only to have attendance, not only to have people attending school, but what is the quality of education being given. We are also we are told at the ceremony that the issue of technology, the curriculum of our school education, these are all things that need to be looked into if we have to address the issue of poverty. So we consider all these critical indicators under education. Then living standard, we look at water reliability or water sufficiency, or we also look at sanitation, housing material, cooking fuel, and asset. All these are considered under the dimension of living standard. Then the last one of dimension that we consider under the MPI 2022 is unemployment. As we all know, unemployment is one of the bane of critical factor that is taking people into poverty in the country. If unemployment is addressed, we know that we are moving towards solving the problem of poverty. So unemployment is there. Underemployment is there because of the nature of our education system. We have a lot of graduate driving, Okada, driving taxi. So we also look at underemployment in terms of time-related and in terms of skill-related underemployment. And then, very important, of recent development, we also had what we call security shock. Security shock is another indicator under works and shocks. All the households that have been affected by kidnapping, banditry, and all that are also given opportunity to express themselves, and we have quantified that to form part of what will take people and household into poverty. Generally, that is how this year's MPI is computed through dimensions, 4 of them, and about 14 indicators that were considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Statistician-General. Another point where I would like to highlight, which the Statistician-General left for Rushna to speak on, is the child poverty aspect of the report, of the survey. For the first time, we looked more comprehensively into child poverty. And this is very significant because a lot of the times we have projects that are being designed that are not exactly data-driven. So if we don't have data that tells us, that pinpoints exactly in what dimension, in what areas people or even children are poor, how then can we address ultimately what the issues are? So I would call on Rushna to speak firstly on the work that they have done in the space around child poverty. I recall speaking with one of the team members within UNICEF, and she was excitedly speaking about activities in Lagos State and how they've been able to support the government in terms of using data to influence the budgeting process within the state. And it's quite critical because even though we are going to launch and we are not exactly saying what the headline results are on the MPI until Thursday, it's interesting to see that a lot of these activities are going on, but now is a concerted effort. So beyond the data that is being collected for adults, for the youth, but also for this time around, we have the one that we call the Child Poverty MPI. So I would like Rushna speak passionately as you do on your involvement within the development of the child MPI, what it means, the adoption of it, and what you would expect to see going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll just pick it up where the SG has left. There was a person, Amartya Sen, who got a Nobel Prize, and he rightly mentioned that it is not the economic prosperity of a country, but actually the progress in the social indicator that makes a country. So I think I first would like to congratulate the government that actually they are doing this MPI, which is looking at beyond the consumption and economic and monetary poverty. And he has mentioned all the elements. What we are looking at, the acute deprivations. And if you hear what has been spoken this morning, we have talked about a lot of issues. We've talked about also the investments that should be made. But one element and a critical element, we mentioned young people, but we forgot the ones who does not have a voice, that are the children. So the MPI is, and particularly looking at the children, is a big welcome for us. But we have been doing this, what we call the multiple overlapping deprivation, which we use another methodology where we look at 7 areas of deprivation. And if there are more than 3 areas of deprivation for children, we look at them as children who are in poverty. And with that multiple overlapping deprivation, we find that nearly 53%, 53.7% of children are actually in poverty. So now coming to, so this is not the MPI. This is what I'm saying is that we've been already investing in data and evidence so that we can make concerted effort and look at what is needed for children within this population. Now coming to the MPI, again, it's a big welcome. It is giving a focus, a face to children in the MPI. That while I'm sure the MPI will look at, the deprivations and children will be included, but when we look at the more overlapping deprivation that children are facing, and maybe not adults because they're in the adult families, that might be even higher. And that will allow us to actually design policies and programs, which is critical for children. So it's not about the income, but also whether the children are achieving or accessing healthcare, education, and living standard, access to water. And also the NPI is looking at age disaggregated data. So we also have 0 to 17, but it further breaks it down to 0 to 4, which is a group that, and in the deprivations, what we have done, we have actually extended to 8 areas to even just to look at the 0 to 4, which includes immunization, nutrition, as was mentioned. So this will allow us to really look at what we need to focus and what kind of programs within the overall poverty alleviation program that needs to be addressed and looked at for the children. So this is a big, huge welcome for us. And then mentioning what you have said that, what is happening in Lagos. So that was where we have based on multidimensional child poverty analysis that we did earlier. We are also looking at, as UNICEF and with partners, that how the deprivations are actually distributed around Nigeria. So we don't make a blanket approach that every state in Nigeria has the same issues or the children have the same issues. So this has really helped us, and I'm sure the NPI on children will further help us to focus within the households, the dynamics that are happening. So I'll leave it there and then I'll pick it up later.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for highlighting and showcasing the work that you continue to do. I'm very much aware of the MODA methodology and also the MPI. You basically, beyond the income-based measurement at looking at poverty, looking at it multidimensionally and how it overlaps. Because I used to make an illustration, I'd say a lot of Nigerians, let me say the middle class, if you have like 10 million savings in your account and you happen to be ill, maybe one of the terminal illnesses, maybe cancer, you just see people automatically that were comfortable just fall into poverty because access to the NHIS, for instance, is not available, or it just erodes all the savings that you've had. And also in education. So because you can see someone living in Lagos comparing to someone living in Sokoto, for instance, or somebody living in Bayelsa compared to Port Harcourt, the different dimensions, different deprivations that they face will be different. For instance, I am from Ondo State. There are some places in Ondo State that have not even seen light, electricity in the past 13 years. And so if you are living in those areas that are riverine areas, and your major source of income is fishing, and there is no cold storage. So you are forced by the end of the day to sell all your catch, and you sell it at a giveaway price. And so the cycle of poverty will be, continue to perpetuate itself. And those are the things. So those people live in those riverine areas that have not access to electricity, will say they are electricity poor or power poor, even though some other dimensions, they may be going to school. So if we identify the multidimensional ways that people are being affected by poverty, we have the real-time, on-time data. We begin to use this kind of data to influence budgeting, which I will speak to later, and also to address how we design specifically projects that would quite create a lot of impact and move the needle towards reducing extreme poverty in Nigeria. At the opening of the session today, the summit today, we had the importance of having private sector partnership within government. And it is my honor to today have on the panel Mr. Sadiq Usman, the Director, Group Strategy and Stakeholders Relations at Flour Mills. He's representing the CEO, who I guess he was appointed one of the, was it the vice chairman on the NES? So congratulations. You can see how government and private sector partnerships quite critical. So we are eager to hear what you'd have to say in terms of, the Statistician-General also have highlighted inflation and the correlation between inflation and the food sector, nutrition, and the likes of it. And Rushna also, because when you look at poverty amongst children, most of it are in nutrition, in stunted weight. And so I would like to, for you to speak to us in terms of what is the role of the private sector in moving the needle in addressing food poverty that also cross into health, that also cross into education. The Vice President talked about the school feeding program, but then we have, because children that don't feed, they can't stay in school. But then we still have the data that say a lot of Nigerian children are still out of school. So how do you see the importance of food, of nutrition, which your company is quite squarely sitting to address? So how, in terms of poverty and food, so take us through the role of the private sector and how you see the importance of getting the data right and using the data to move the needle, and partnering, of course, with the private sector.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel. I feel a little bit like the odd one out in the private sector, but what binds us together, I think we're talking about a topic that's all very dear to our hearts. And we're addressing it in very different ways. So thank you for the opportunity of having me. I'm standing in for Mr. Olusanya, as you said. Unfortunately, due to a change in timing of the session, he had other commitments, so he couldn't make it on this. You raised quite a few issues, which I'll try and address, and you can stop me as we go ahead so that others get a chance to speak and I can come back to them. First of all, I think I'd like to commend the federal government of Nigeria through the National Bureau of Statistics and UNICEF and other partners on the multi-dimensional way that they've chosen to look at poverty in Nigeria. I think it's very welcome. You've spoken about why it was needed, and but it's I think it's much more beyond that. You know, I think someone in the earlier session today says, if you cannot measure something, monitor something, then you don't know when you're making progress. So I think that's a starting point. And I like my co-panelists here talked about the importance of data. We in the private sector, some would argue, are a lot more focused on performance metrics, right? And focused on, ultimately, the key performance metric is profitability. And it's always that. But there are other performance metrics in which to measure your progress, you need to know how you're constantly doing according to those metrics. So commend all the partners, look forward to reading and digesting the report. I think it's come at a very auspicious time, actually, for us in the country. And I'll speak, if you forgive me, I know I'm here representing private sector, but there's a specific context that I would bring, which is I happen to work for a food and agribusiness company. And considering the fact that it's one of the largest or leading agribusiness groups in the country, it's also got significant production sites in both urban and rural areas. And the nature of what we do, particularly in terms of the crops or value chains we're involved in, makes us very involved with the farming population. For instance, we're the single largest buyers of maize in the country. We're the single largest buyers of soybean. We're the single largest buyers of wheat in the country, whatever wheat is produced. So there's a linkage there to the rural communities, and we have factories and things like that in rural communities. So you raised some very good, interesting points. I know because of time, if I could just maybe hone on two issues. One is the whole concept about nutrition, because we're a food company, the whole concept about nutrition and getting nutritious food to children in particular. And the other is the concept of having, if I could put it, because I'm just trying to put the points together, the whole concept of affordability and the shrinking consumer wallet, which I'm sure the SG can speak about, which I'll be interested to know the period of survey for the poverty index, because I can tell you in the last 6 months, particularly with the start of the Russia-Ukrainian conflict and the things it has set in motion, there are some significant shifts now happening in Nigeria regarding food, as we're starting to see, not only in terms of inflation, but many other aspects. I recall at the last household survey, I think it was 2019 when it was done, if I recall, the average consumer was spending about 56% of their income on food. I think we see it now closer to 75, 80%. So because of food inflation, as you can imagine. So what does that say for their disposable income, if there's such a thing now, that they can spend outside of food on other competing priorities, such as energy, transport, health, sanitation. So I think that's one element that is very topical. We don't have to go into lots of details of what has caused this, because I think they're well known, global events and changing supply chains that have affected this tremendously. But I think it's something that we should pay very close attention to, because I think it's going to create a new class of urban poverty in particular, that we've not seen for a very long time. The other is around the nature of nutrition itself. The company that I work for, because of our product range, we happen to be involved in food fortification that goes on in the flour value chain, specifically around wheat, sugar, and edible oil. We're required by law to fortify with vitamin A those products that we make. And it has obviously tremendous health outcomes, particularly for children, to bring it home. But if you think of the typical Nigerian consumer, especially outside of the urban poor, how much of those products are they now consuming? So we say flours, right? How many people consume bread today and wheat flours? If you look at the population of Nigerians, and we've seen significant shrinkage, actually, of our volumes of production as a result of these global events that are happening and the tightening consumer wallet. So a lot of people consume gari, a lot of people consume yam flour, but those are not fortified foods. And for majority of people, a lot of people, that is a critical part of their diet. And so what are we doing in that respect, in making sure that the critical vitamins and minerals that they're missing out on, whether as children or adults, are being supported through that? Because there's only a narrow range of products that we can do that. So let me pause here on these two things. I just wanted to bring out a stream of thoughts, I think, just to put on the table and show opportunities or possibilities for further collaboration, as you said.
Absolutely, Mr. Usman. And there was a point that you did mention that I would like to reiterate: the shrinking wallet of, in terms of the purchasing power of the consumers. So if you spend about 70% of your income, what's left? What's left? And what's even being purchased in terms of the food products? Is it nutritious, or is just what you're taking in and it doesn't add any value? And I must also, use that opportunity to mention that there was a program that the government had introduced a while back, the homegrown school feeding program. And because the MPI looks at it in a multidimensional way, so also social protection in terms of projects that is being done should look at things in overlapping, in multidimensional, multi-sectoral way. So what the NCIP, the vision of the NCIP was at the time was, can we begin to look inwards beyond, the pandemic happened, it was as if it was being expected. Can we have homegrown gardens? Like, can we have homegrown feeding? So in Sokoto, if it's moringa that is more nutritious instead of having imported stuff, can we have farmers, develop it? So within household, you have the father that is the farmer, the mother that is the cook, their graduate child that is is a teacher within the Empower work, and also then you put them into clusters, you give them cash transfer. They begin to get into the banking system, because a lot of them are on bank. They cannot increase their purchasing power. They can increase their business acumen, and then have access to loans, even small loans within the household. So those are the dimensional way that government can begin to look at the work. But unfortunately, it didn't exactly include a lot of private sector, because when we have private sector participation in this kind of government efforts, then you can see a lot of a needle being moved, and it would be more sustainable than government, pumping in money, and then another government comes, is discontinued, and the rest of that. So I'm not supposed to so much talk. I'm supposed to moderate the conversation. So I will just very quickly call on Ms. Yosola Akinbi. She leads a lot of conversation at subnational level, at national level, also at the presidency, in terms of human capital management. We have developments. So we heard at the opening session where a lot of conversation was said around the social contract. So in terms of poverty, the social contract perception of the citizens, between the citizen and the government, and where we are globally, how do you think, what do you think are the way forward for Nigeria to move to address SDG 1 and to move out of extreme poverty?
Thank you very much, Moderator, and good afternoon, dear colleagues. I'm quite happy to be here this afternoon, and I think we should actually make this more practical and not go in the field of the Statistician-General of this poverty index and all. For me, I'm just really going to relate it to what I do. Really, if we have to talk about the multidimensional poverty index, if you want me to say it, is Human Capital Development Plus. And that plus, you can include the living standard that he has spoken about, which also is part of human capital development. And then, of course, then the infrastructure and all. So for us, in terms of human capital development, make no mistake, government is not living in denial, but government recognizes that it is important for us to actually move forward in terms of human capital development. And to do this critically, we recognize that it must be a collective effort. And I think sometime back in June, the strategy for moving forward in terms of human capital development was launched by government. And how this relates to all we're talking about is that, look, we're saying that we are poor if we're not educated. We are poor if we do not have good health. We're so poor if we do not have the productivity life of our children, of the population, even getting up to about 60%. Right now, the HCI for Nigeria, well, it has moved a little bit, but it's still 36, really, really below even the sub-Saharan African figure. So that's saying in this recognition also, so for the human capital development, interestingly, the Statistician-General is part of that team. This is not a government thing. It sits across multiple levels of stakeholders, but critically recognizing that the states have a key role to play. And what do I mean by that? And I'm going to relate this to what we're saying in terms of shared prosperity. How can we have shared prosperity when we're not talking about multiple centers of prosperity? Can I repeat that? We're talking about shared prosperity. It shouldn't be about the federal alone. It's about multiple centers of prosperity, and that's the only one that we can talk about sharing. So recognizing this for us in human capital development, we recognize that the subnational really, really very important. And at this time, we're working on transformation across all the states of Nigeria in terms of human capital development. We know we cannot advance in in a second. So for the human capital development space, the strategy is to actually push 6 critical outcomes. And this 6 critical outcomes sits across 3 thematic areas. We have chosen the 3 thematic areas, maybe aspiring with all other development plans of the world. We have health and nutrition, we have education, and we have labor force participation, which focuses mainly on youth empowerment and, of course, the gender, the women. So for the health, we have actually 3 of those critical outcomes, and we know that understunting is a very big problem across Nigeria. And also we know that it is important for the malnutrition thing, I mean, relating it to the stunting, so the under 5 mortality rates, that we know that we need to address it. Then of course, we are also concerned about the adult mortality as well. But of course, I'll go on to talk about the education and how they are all very important. My colleague was telling me that, look, part of the things that she has gained in the world is them sending her to school. She's from the northern part, you know, and that of course has helped her to understand that she cannot just be a baby making machine. And that's not the same for some of her colleagues, that she actually even went to the initial early child school that they have in where she comes from. So what we're saying is that once we are able to address the 6 critical outcomes that we have chosen, then the productive life of the average night will move forward. We will start talking about 60%, and that is how you can move us out of poverty. But not until we do that, then we have a problem. So like I said, it sits across different levels. We started off by having a vision of healthy, educated, and productive Nigerians by the year 2030 on purpose, because we're ascribing to all other development plans, but also, of course, relating it substantially now to transformation all across the states. And we're working with all the 36 states now to see how they can align to the national vision and see how they can all work in having the HCR of Nigeria move forward. And if the HCR of Nigeria move forward, remember I started from that point of view that the NPI, the poverty multidimensional is HCI plus. So if HCI can really improve substantially, then of course we will have a good basis for that. And of course, in our work also, we recognize that the communities are important. All this is not about big infrastructure and big things to happen, but we're working with our communities to see how all of them will help. Out of school children that we're talking about, it's not about just government, it's about the chief, the leader. Where are you there? How are you ensuring that those children are not roaming the streets while you're going to work, and making sure that you have a system in place in your community that ensures that they go to school? What are you doing? It's a collective thing to see how we can have basic services health-wise in your community, you know, even either as private individual or as a leader in the society, or perhaps you need to go back to our basics where we come from, states of origin, and see how we can encourage the traditional rulers to take the lead in the human capital development workwear. So all of it connected, and let's see how we can move Nigeria forward.
Thank you, Ms. Yosola. I must say that the intention, the goal of this meeting today, this session today, is to, one, tell us that, inform us that we have the MPI results that will be launched by the president on Thursday. Here's still a Transcorp. Secondly, is for us to understand that beyond the monetary measurements of poverty, we also need to begin to look at multidimensional poverty. And also, what are the solutions that we can hear in terms of way forward and moving the needle by our private sector partners in terms of food, in terms of, you know, contribution of child poverty in the larger framework in the households, and also from the Statistician-General, when figures and data is being chunked out, what does that mean? How can the government use such data to influence how budgeting is being done, projects are also being designed. And thank you, Ms. Yosola, for highlighting the importance of, community grassroots engagement and participation in addressing these issues. Before I quickly ask questions, I accept questions from the audience. I will just cycle back quickly to the Statistician-General. We just have less than 10 minutes to conclude this session. Statistician-General, sir, I would like to know, because you did mention that one of the dimensions that we had is shocks and insecurity. And I must confess that if you don't have that security in place, how do we address? We can have, good budgeting, budget that aligns. We can have, the projects that are designed. So also the data has been provided, the data is designed around, the project is designed around data. But if insecurity is still there, how do we address? Because these data are data that we should begin to use. So what is the intention of the Statistics Office in terms of when this data is out are the solutions that you think the Nigerian government and also the public can take forward in terms of the use case?
Thank you, the moderator. I think that question leads me to rolling out what are we going to gain from the data that we are going to get from Multidimensional Poverty Index. As we said, it is multi-dimensional in nature, so also is the advantages to be derived from it. One, the data from MPI will allow government to allow projects and programs to key in into the 4 dimensions of MPI that we just mentioned. All programs, projects relating to Earth can be brought together under the Earth dimension of MPI. All programs and projects of government, both at the federal and state, can also be aligned to address the data, the result coming out under education, when you look at education dimension from MPI. If you look at living standard, the issue of water reliability, the issue of sanitation, cooking fuel, we are talking of clean energy and all that, then the asset owned by the household. So we can align programs in all these areas from various tiers of government to go in line with the data, to address the data coming from the living standard component of MPI. The same thing goes for works and shocks. All the areas, all the MDAs, Ministry, Department, Agency of Government that are addressing the issue of flood, addressing the issue of insecurity, addressing the issue of banditry, kidnapping, and all that across the country, we align together to address the data coming out from works and shocks component of the MPI. The MPI will also help governments to unify the MDAs to work together to form a synergy to address the menace or the problems and issues that we have under education, under health, and under agriculture. Not only this, MPI will also help government to measure our progress that we are making in the area of SDG, especially SDG 1 to 8, 10, and 11. The indicators and targets under these SDGs are contained in the result that will be coming out from the MPI. When we talk of genders equity, SDG, the MPI also addressed that because the data has been decomposed and disaggregated by gender. The data that we have under the MPI is also disaggregated by urban and rural. So somebody is mentioning urban poor. So we'll be able to get the proportion of people that are living under poverty in the urban areas as well as in the rural area. The same thing goes for youth. The MPI data is also decomposed by youth. What proportion of our youth are in the poverty, under poverty. Not only this, if you also look at the strength of MPI, it is ability to streamline the social investment programs. We have mentioned severally about the various programs of government to address the social investment. The register, especially the beneficiary register that we have in various agencies of government, can be aligned with the result or with the component and dimensions of MPI that we have. And that will make it much more getting fruitful. I think the vice president was telling us that we should make the register, the social investment register that we have, to create wealth for our people. So using the data from the MPI will help us to achieve that when we combine it with the registers, various registers that we have in the country. And then the MPI can also complement the monetary measurement that we have. So I will have a total and absolute view of where poverty is, the people that are affected, the location where they can be found, and then so that government can be able to implement programs to address them. I think these are some of the things. Let me stop.
The Statistician-General is eager to have the result launched and quite passionate about the use of it ultimately. But just cycling to Mr. Sadiq, in terms of insecurity, well, of course, food insecurity or food security. So what do you think, so how do you think we can nip that in the bud in terms of vis-a-vis our population, our booming population? Because we can have all of this, put in place and make projections. I know that recently the government did, did a tour of the grains ban that we had. IITA is there doing some work, planning to the future, technology, and the rest of that. Then the war happened, then the COVID-19 happened. But we have a booming population that is quite alarming. So in terms of food security, which is quite important in terms of addressing poverty, what is your take and what is the way forward in planning? We can have the data, but what do you think we can do much more?
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I think it's a question actually I'm very personally passionate about, because this is something that I have been trying to preach to many people in government about. Regarding what needs to be done about the issue of food insecurity and how it links to physical insecurity as well. So that we don't get carried away. The only way I believe that we're going to fundamentally tackle poverty in Nigeria is, I think social investment programs are good, and they would help for some of the way there. But ultimately, it's about creating economic opportunity for people. If we do not create economic opportunity for people where people can take control of their lives and deploy whatever skills, training, and they have to lift themselves, whether it's through their education that's given to them, then we cannot. And from what we've heard in the plenary, the private sector is supposed to be at the forefront of the economy. That doesn't always feel like the case when you're in the private sector in Nigeria. You're supposed to be at the forefront of the economy, trying to create these opportunities, okay? So if we don't have a private sector centered approach that is about creating economic opportunity, particularly for SMEs in the private sector, we're not going to tackle poverty. My company, as big as it is, employs 19,000 people, just 19,000 people. But the SMEs that work with us, whether it's the distributors, the dealers, the transporters, they employ people in their hundreds of thousands that work with us. That's where the real opportunity is. So that's one answer to your question. On the issue of food security, specifically now drilling down, So I'm not going to say anything that's not been said already today, if we're all listening at the plenary. If we have population growth, SG can talk about how much we're growing very simply. More than 2% a year population growth. At this current rate, we need to take our agricultural production from about 20 million tons of grain a year to almost doubling that in the next 5 years, or else we're going to have a serious food security problem, in our view. And we're the largest buyers of grain, so we should know. How do you do that? Very simply, you have to improve productivity of agriculture.
I'll stop you at that. Yes.
There's no fancy.
Absolutely, that's the bullet right there. So quickly, so I don't know if we have any questions or feedback from the audience before we do one last word from the panelists. Any questions? We have people virtually. Okay, so there's a question I would like to pose to Ms. Yosola. There's a quite correlation between human capital development and also, of course, poverty. But I want you to highlight, because within the survey that has been conducted, we didn't look at the prison systems. And we have been talking about our youth, we have been talking about unemployment. So and we have a lot of our able-bodied, quite intelligent people still awaiting trials. Even while awaiting trials, they are not being, productive. And we've talked about productivity. So in terms of human capital development and addressing poverty and not leaving anyone behind, what do you think we can do better within the prison systems? Ms. Yosola.
Thank you very much. I don't know why you're talking about just the prison system. That's the correctional one. I said, what is important, what is fundamental is that for the Nigerian child, we want to ensure that the productivity level is above 60%. And to do that, it is really very simple. These are the 6 critical outcomes we have. And we need to have the data, the enablers that will help us to move forward. And we're saying that it doesn't sit just with government, it sits across multiple levels of stakeholders. Let each stakeholders do what they need to do, and we all work together. The coordination is what we're providing now so that we're able to work on those critical outcomes and have the productivity level of a Nigerian child move from that 36% to about 60%, so as to be able to compete favorable. And what it means that if we're educated, it will help. The health also will help. Everything is linked together and we can move forward. Because this demographic dividend we're talking about, I always like to refer to it as demographic disaster if we do not do what we're supposed to do to ensure that all is captured, all is working, all we're all doing is within that productivity life of the Nigerian child to move forward.
Thank you. Leave no one behind includes those in IDP camps, includes those in correctional centers, include, the very young people that we were able to capture within the MPI. As a last word, what would you recommend in terms of data demand and use for the private sector, for the government, and also for international development partners to use data to move the needle in addressing all of this?
Thank you. I think I will just go with Madam, what she said, that it's about 50% of the population are children or under 18, and we have to make universal investments. And these are just like a compass that's going to show us what to do. They are giving us the data, and it is all about working everyone together to look at that how that data can be translated into actions actions for children, because that's where the investment, the returns are the highest. If we are not investing in 0 to 4, and the way we will strategize to invest on then, whether we do the universal child benefits or whether we look at intra, household dynamics, where we see that in a household, there can be boys and girls dynamics. So if we don't have a gender sensitive, transformational poverty alleviation plan, and where children sit at the center, this will not change. And I always hear the children, when we refer to them, that they are tomorrow. They are not tomorrow, they are today. And if we are not investing, this is the investment that one has to make, looking at the data to monitor what is happening, to strategize, to do the policies so that the children gets the best benefit out of the investments that are made in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a powerful note. Statistician-General, one last note, please.
Thank you. I would like to assure all Nigerians and the federal government and state government that MBS will continue to provide quality data for government and private sector to plan and to make policies. If we want to continue to measure child poverty, we'll be providing the data in high quality. If we want to continue to measure the human capital development, we continue to provide quality data for you to do that. The MPI result for 2022 will be launched in Transcorp, this same place, not this same venue, but the same place here on Thursday, November 17. And then the result will be online at our website anytime once it is launched. We're also going to launch a poverty situation room, or what we call poverty lab, where we're going to have all kinds of information and data on poverty related issues. That will be situated in the National Bureau of Statistics headquarters. Feel free to come at any time and you get a lot more of data on poverty. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. And I hope the conversation, we keep the conversation going. Thank you.